Illusions of control. There are people walking free right now who strangled children, people who shot strangers in broad daylight, people who murdered their own spouses, and then calmly went home, packed a bag, and disappeared. And this isn't rumor, it isn't conspiracy, it isn't a Netflix script designed to scare you for entertainment. These are real people with real names, real faces, and very real victims, and the only reason most of us don't think about them is because it's easier to believe the system already handled it. We like to think cameras catch everything, databases connect everything, borders are monitored, and justice eventually catches up. But that belief starts to crack when you realize these cases didn't happen in dark alleys or remote forests. They happened in restaurants, shopping centers, barber shops, places people visit every day without thinking twice. The crimes were violent, the evidence was clear, and in some cases the entire act was captured on camera, yet the killers are still gone. No prison, no sentence, just silence. That's why this list exists. Not because the FBI wants publicity, but because even with all the tools of modern law enforcement, there are still people who slip through everything. The FBI's 10 most wanted list isn't a collection of old ghosts or solved mysteries. It's a warning. A list of individuals considered so dangerous that the government is openly admitting it cannot catch them alone. Tonight, we're not here to dramatize these crimes or sensationalize violence. We're here to explain how this list works, who ends up on it, and why in a world that watches everything, some of the worst criminals are still out there breathing the same air you are. And the most disturbing part isn't what they've done. It's how easily they vanished. A list born from fear. 1949. It's the middle of the day, the kind of hour when people aren't expecting danger. Cars are pulling in and out. A door swings open, someone laughs, someone checks their phone. Then a man walks into the space like he belongs there. No mask, no rush. He stops, looks forward, reaches into his waistband and fires. One shot, sometimes two, sometimes more. They're screaming, but it comes late because for a second no one understands what just happened. By the time people react, it's already over. The victim is on the ground, blood spreading across tile that gets cleaned every night. And the man who pulled the trigger doesn't sprint. He doesn't panic. He turns, walks out the same door, blends into traffic, disappears. Cameras caught it. Witnesses saw it. The time, the place, the face, all documented. And still nothing happens. In another case, it's quieter. Someone gets into a car with a person they know. No struggle, no alarm. The drive is short. The road is familiar. Then the car stops. One person gets out alive. The other never does. Days later, police find a body where no one usually looks. The car shows up abandoned miles away like a final insult. These aren't crimes hidden in darkness. They happen where you shop, where you wait, where you assume you're safe. And standing there watching it unfold, the most terrifying realization isn't the violence itself. It's how fast normal life resumes once the killer is gone. The price of having your name on the list. Hours later, the crime scene is quiet again. The tape is gone. The blood is cleaned. People walk past the spot without knowing exactly where to look. Somewhere in an office miles away, investigators replay the footage frame by frame. The face is clear. The timeline makes sense. The name is known. And that's the moment most people assume the story ends. But this is where it actually changes. Because when days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, the search stops being local. Tips dry up. Leads go nowhere. And eventually the case lands on a desk where the conclusion is blunt and uncomfortable. This person isn't just a suspect anymore. They're a threat that hasn't been contained. That's when a name gets added to a list the FBI doesn't use lightly. Being placed on the 10 most wanted list isn't about fame or headlines. It's what happens when the Bureau believes someone has already crossed a line and is capable of doing it again. It means investigators think this person is still out there, still moving, still dangerous, and that closed doors won't stop them. The list exists because silence didn't work. It exists because sometimes the only option left is to put a face in front of the world and hope someone somewhere recognizes it before another scene like this one has to be cleaned up again. Youth violence and first blood. Once a name makes it onto that list, the rules change. This isn't probation. There's no court date waiting somewhere down the line. It's a silent acknowledgement that the window to catch them cleanly has already closed. Investigators stop asking if the suspect will be found and start asking how many chances they'll get before someone else gets hurt. The criteria is brutal for a reason. This isn't about a single mistake or a bad decision under pressure. It's about patterns escalation and the belief that the person you're looking for won't stop on their own. That's why there are only 2 ways off the list, and neither of them is comfortable. Capture or death. No third option. No quiet removal. And once the name is public, it never really goes away. Posters go up. Alerts circulate. Tips trickle in from people who think they recognize a face at a gas station, an airport, a border crossing. Most of those leads go nowhere. Some almost work. A sighting comes in, agents rush in, and they're minutes too late. The trail goes cold again. The list isn't a finish line. It's a warning sign. It means law enforcement believes time is now the enemy, and that every day this person stays free is another opportunity for the story to repeat itself somewhere else. Crime unfolding in plain sight. He was 17 years old when it happened. Young enough that no one thought to be afraid of him. He worked at a restaurant. He had a girlfriend. He looked normal. That's what made the mistake possible. The meeting was supposed to be simple, money owed. A short conversation, nothing dramatic. She got into the car because she trusted him. She didn't know someone else was already waiting inside. A gun came out before she understood what was happening. They drove to an ATM first. She withdrew the money. Then they kept driving, out of town, past the last familiar street, into an area where there were no cameras, no witnesses, no reason for anyone to stop. That's where it ended. Her body was left behind like evidence no one expected to be found quickly. By the time police realized she was missing, he was already gone. Not hiding, moving. Her car was discovered abandoned. Then his showed up hundreds of miles away in another state. That wasn't panic. That was planning. Surveillance footage later showed him crossing into another country, calm, unremarkable, blending in with travelers who had nothing to do with the murder. His accomplice eventually turned herself in. He didn't. He vanished completely. What stunned investigators wasn't just the violence, it was the efficiency. How quickly he understood what mattered and what didn't. Time mattered. Distance mattered. Borders mattered. At 17, he didn't just commit a murder, he executed an exit strategy. That's when the case changed. This wasn't about a teenager who snapped. This was about someone who learned very early that if you move fast enough and far enough, the system struggles to follow. And once that realization set in, the fear wasn't about what he had already done. It was about what he might do next, knowing he had gotten away with it once. When borders erase justice. This one didn't happen in the dark. It happened when stores were open and people were awake. An open-air shopping center. Cars parked close together. A barber shop with the door open, the sound of clippers humming inside. A man walks in like he's waiting for a haircut. He stands there for a moment long enough that no one feels alarmed. Then he pulls a gun and shoots someone in the head. No argument, no warning, just a single decisive act. The victim collapses. Chairs fall over. Someone screams too late. And the shooter doesn't run. He turns around, walks out the same way he came in, and disappears into the crowd. Cameras record everything. His face, his body, his movement. The timestamp is exact. Investigators later watched the footage again and again, slowing it down, freezing frames tracing his steps. They know who he is. They know what he did. What they don't know is where he went. Witnesses saw him leave. No one stopped him. No one chased him. Because in moments like that, people freeze. By the time the shock wears off, the gap is already too large. Hours later, the scene is quiet. Blood cleaned, doors reopened, customers return. But the man who pulled the trigger is already miles away, possibly out of the country, possibly gone for good. This is the kind of case that shatters the belief that visibility equals safety. Everything was public. Everything was recorded. And still the outcome was the same. A body left behind, a killer free, and a growing list of names that proves how thin the line is between ordinary life and irreversible violence. Power money and organized crime. By the time the paperwork is finished, the trail is already fading. Phone records stop updating. Credit cards go quiet. Border alerts come back empty or too late. One step across a line on a map, and the case slows to a crawl. Extradition requests take months, sometimes years. Jurisdictions argue. Agencies wait on each other. Meanwhile, the person everyone is looking for keeps moving. New city, new routine, new name. For investigators, this is where cases go to stall. Not because the crime wasn't serious enough, but because distance turns urgency into bureaucracy. Some of the people on this list learned that lesson early. They didn't hide in basements or remote cabins. They went somewhere familiar, somewhere crowded, somewhere just far enough away to complicate everything. And once they were gone, the momentum died. Tips still came in, but they were vague. Sightings were unconfirmed. By the time agents followed up, the person was already somewhere else. Families waited. Years passed. Nothing changed. This is why borders matter more than weapons. They don't stop violence. They delay consequences. And in that delay, people disappear. The most frustrating part isn't that the system failed once. It's that it keeps failing in the same place over and over again, turning geography into protection and time into an ally for people who should never have either. The face of greed. This is where the story stops being about one person and starts becoming something harder to fight. These aren't criminals trying to disappear. They don't need to. They operate in plain sight, protected by money, fear, and numbers. In some places, they control entire neighborhoods. In others, they decide who lives, who disappears, and who never gets reported missing at all. Kidnappings aren't accidents. They're transactions. Ransoms are negotiated like business deals. Children are recruited before they understand what they're holding in their hands. Violence becomes routine, not emotional. When law enforcement moves in, it isn't one suspect they're chasing. It's an organization with lookouts, weapons, escape routes, and people willing to die to protect the hierarchy. Some of the names on the most wanted list don't hide because they don't have to. They move with security. They change locations before raids happen. They know when borders are watched and when they aren't, and every arrest below them barely dents the structure above. For investigators, this is the most dangerous kind of enemy. You don't end the threat by catching one man. You expose him and the machine keeps running. The fear here isn't just what these people have already done. It's how much power they still have while the rest of the world waits for a knock on the door that never comes. The children left behind. Not every crime on this list involves a weapon. Some of them don't leave blood on the floor or bodies at a scene. Instead, they leave bank accounts empty and lives quietly destroyed. The damage happens slowly across emails, presentations, promises that sound just believable enough. Money moves first. Trust disappears next. By the time victims realize what's happening, everything they worked for is already gone. These criminals don't need to pull a trigger. They build systems designed to drain people instead. Fake investments, invented technologies, entire empires propped up by lies that only collapse once the money stops flowing. Millions of people are affected, spread across countries and continents, each one thinking they were the exception. When the scheme finally unravels, the architect is already gone. No forwarding address, no arrest photo, just lawsuits chasing shadows. Investigators call it non-violent crime, but the word feels hollow when families lose homes, retirements vanish, and years of work disappear overnight. The absence of blood doesn't make the harm smaller, it just makes it easier to ignore. And that's why these names end up on the same list as killers and kidnappers. Because greed at this scale isn't just theft, it's exploitation with a body count that no one can calculate. Why they are still free. This is where the stories stop feeling distant, where the details become harder to say out loud. Some of the names on this list are tied to victims who never had a chance to understand what was happening to them. Children taken from sidewalks, from homes, from moments that were supposed to be ordinary. There's no chase, no dramatic escape, just silence where a child used to be. Parents wait through hours that turn into days, days that turn into years. Bedrooms stay untouched. Birthdays pass without answers. In some cases, the truth arrives too late, delivered through a DNA match or a forgotten piece of evidence that finally surfaces. In others, it never comes at all. The person responsible vanishes across borders, absorbed by time, leaving nothing behind but questions. These cases don't fade because they're unsolved. They linger because they're unresolved. Every update reopens the wound. Every rumor raises hope just enough to hurt again. Investigators carry these files differently. There's no professional distance when the victim is a child. The urgency never leaves. And that's why these cases end up here. Not because they're old, but because they still matter. Because as long as the person responsible is free, the crime isn't finished. It's suspended. Waiting. The public as the final weapon. The easy answer is to say the system failed. That someone missed a detail, filed the wrong report, or didn't move fast enough. But the truth is more uncomfortable than that. Most of these cases were investigated aggressively. Warrants were issued, tips were chased, leads were exhausted, and still the people responsible kept moving. The problem isn't effort, it's limits. Law enforcement stops at borders. Laws move slower than people. Paperwork doesn't keep up with panic. And criminals learn quickly. They watch what happens after the first crime. They see how long it takes for information to spread, how coordination breaks down, how attention fades once headlines disappear. Then they adapt. They travel light. They avoid patterns. They disappear into places where being found requires permission that takes time to secure. By the time that permission arrives, the window is already closed. That's why so many of these cases feel frozen in place. Not because no one cares, but because the system was built for a world where criminals stayed put. These people don't. They move faster than the rules meant to stop them. And every day they remain free is a reminder that justice isn't just about knowing who did it. It's about catching them before they do it again. A list that never ends. The most unsettling thing about the FBI's 10 most wanted list isn't the names on it. It's the space it always leaves behind. When one person is captured, another eventually takes their place. The list doesn't shrink. It refreshes. That alone should tell us something. We like to believe justice is inevitable, that time always corrects what violence breaks. But these cases prove something harder to accept. Justice is fragile. It depends on speed, attention, cooperation, and people willing to act before the trail goes cold. For every name here, there are families who never got answers, communities that learned how quickly normal life can shatter, and victims who didn't get a second chance. This list exists because the system on its own isn't enough. It exists as a warning, not a relic. Because the people on it aren't legends or ghosts from the past. They're real, they're alive, and they're still moving. And the uncomfortable truth is that sometimes the final difference between another victim and an arrest comes down to awareness. A face recognized. A detail remembered. A tip sent at the right moment. If this story unsettled you, it should. If it made you uncomfortable, that's the point. And if you want to understand how these cases unfold, how people vanish, and how some are finally caught, make sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Because the list never really ends, and neither does the responsibility to pay attention.